Someone needs to unmute Barbara.
I just unmuted. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer and song and those words. We had some technical difficulties bringing Renee on, so I'm not sure if he's here and he's ready.
Someone needs to unmute Barbara.
I just unmuted. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer and song and those words. We had some technical difficulties bringing Renee on, so I'm not sure if he's
Renee
here.
is here. Renee is here.
Yeah, just unmuted. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer and song and those words. We had some technical difficulties bringing.
I'm here.
Okay, I had some technical.
You got muted, Barbara. You got muted.
Okay, few technical difficulties here. I was trying to get us live streaming on Facebook. We're now live streaming on YouTube. And thank you so much for those words, Rabbi Alana. And I'm so happy to say that Renee Lickman is here. So one moment while I introduce Renee. Renee Lickman was born in France before the Second World War and spent the war years hiding with a Christian family. He never forgot that his father was killed by Nazi fascists, and Renee has remained an anti-fascist throughout his own life. He will tell you his story, and thank you so much for being here, Renee.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm going to talk about my story a little bit, and then I want to make some comments also about Gaza, of course. So I was born in Paris before the war, and my father found a spot for me to hide before he went into the military, and when the Germans were first invading. So there's a picture of myself as a 2-year-old child with my father in a French army uniform and my mother. I always note that my mother is smiling in that picture, and we don't have any other pictures of her smiling because my father was killed right away in combat. And it left me with my French family on the right-hand side, who, as you could see, was like you might say, a farming family just outside of Paris. Of course, they were not Jewish, and we're still. So I was raised without a kind of a Jewish identity throughout the war years in that town. And after the war, I went back to my mother, my Jewish mom, and there was of course, with hidden children, there's always an issue of identity, who you are, because I was always hidden as a Jew. And so we dealt with it, my mother and my French family, myself. It was kind of difficult emotionally. When I was 13, I came to the United States and became an American kid. And I went into the army. I went to art school, and I became a painter. But I always stayed in touch with my French family until they died, and I'm still in touch with their relatives. So, and then I came to. I was in New York, and then during the Vietnam era, I became very active in the anti-Vietnam struggle, mostly in media, and that's how I got to Detroit to make a film on the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which we completed. It's called Finally Got the News. And if people want to know about the history of Black workers in the plants in Detroit, you can see that film, Finally Got the News. Can I get that picture of Ali, my friend, with whom I worked politically? Ali is on the right, as he was getting older, and I was as well. And way on the left is his cousin, Mohammed. So that was my introduction to, and we worked together in those years during the anti-war movement. Ali and I worked together as veterans, because I was not a Vietnam vet, he was. and so we worked together on Vietnam veterans issues locally. Let me talk about Gaza and some of the things that I'd like um, to talk about in terms of being Holocaust Remembrance Day. If you give me a signal about 2 minutes, that 2-minute signal we've talked about, please, I'll bring it to an end. So the Holocaust has been, they call it weaponized, but I would say used, manipulated, exploited today by various elements in the Jewish community, the Jewish leadership, especially organizations that want to do fundraising. They always, the word Holocaust and the word anti-Semitism always brings in a lot of donors, what they call donors. So, and we've been, tomorrow we're going to be in front of the Holocaust Museum. What's going on today in Gaza is another Holocaust, or as the world has been noticing, it's called genocide. And it's a term, it's really interesting how terms are used or adapted and slowly come to the surface. So when I use the word genocide or some of these other terms, people say, well, that's a little bit extreme. Well, it's no longer extreme. We've all accepted the fact that there's a genocide happening in our name in terms of Jewish community in Gaza, and it's being recognized all over the world. And what it's doing, it's isolating the Jewish community and the United States. Those two countries, I would say, are probably the most hated countries in the world. And the other countries are afraid to say anything, of course, because the United States can punish you severely, and the state of Israel can also punish you with their Jewish lobby or the Israeli lobby. So we have all around us, including the Detroit area, very, very strong Jewish propaganda and means of punishing people that say anything about that's critical of the state of Israel. And so that leads to this new definition of very, very convenient, of anti-Semitism by the IHRA, it's called. Who the hell knows who these people are? But they come up with a definition where they conflate. I noticed this years ago, where they conflate the term anti-Jewish with anti-Israel. And there's a big difference. But if you use them together all the time, people have no idea what you're talking about. So, for example, I'll give you just one example. These young people, we keep hearing about the anti-Semitism on the campuses. And I remember years ago being in touch with one of the Hillel leaders that covered the whole state of Michigan. And I always asked, because I was the chair of this group, I founded the group on Holocaust education. I was always involved in Holocaust education. And I said, how much anti-Semitism are you having on campuses? So that was years ago. And they said, well, not really. We have very emotional exchanges between Arab Palestinian students and Jewish students at these tables, right? But it's really not. It's just emotional discussions. And it seems to me that today, that it would be called anti-Semitism, and the ADL would put it in their list of anti-Semitic incidents, and they're really not. They're just heated discussions. But there's no other term. They're you might say, Israel sentiments that come forward. So, I would leave it at that. For the first time, just a few minutes ago, actually, few minutes ago, a few days ago, the ADL actually made a public statement where they said there is a difference between anti-Jewish sentiments and anti-Israel actions, behavior, and we have become, we the Jewish community have become collateral damage to what the state of Israel does. And I'll give you an example. When I was living in France not too long ago, it was one of these operations they were doing, and there were all these anti-Israel demonstrations, very strong, by the community in Paris, and it was. I remember trying to figure it out, and I'm saying to myself, well, these people have these connections to people back home, and they can't express that, so they express it against local Jews, and so we call that anti-Semitism, but it's really anti-actions against the state of Israel. And I think what's going to happen, we're going to see a lot of so-called anti-Semitism acts where people are very upset with the state of Israel, and they take it out on the local Jewish community. Just a few other points. I think you're familiar with the what's called the let's see, I have it here somewhere. But what's going on now? The Nakba that's going on now began in 1948. The Hamas struggle. I see Hamas as freedom fighters. I see Hamas equal to those fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto who knew they were going to die, and they felt like they want to take some of the enemy with them. Now, of course, Hamas is not perfect. They've had excesses, but they're screaming out of this concentration camp, which is Gaza, and they were successful. They killed a lot of innocent civilians. It's true, they killed, but you have to put that in context. Now, as soon as you say the word "but," the pro-Israel lobby will say, "Oh, you can't say but. You have to start right at this incident that took place right near where my family is living in the south of Israel." And no, and in order to understand what Hamas did, that action they did where they killed a lot of civilians, you have to start in 1947, and every single day has been horror. I follow it very closely. These children are shot in the back by Jewish kids, snipers they're called. They're heroes in Israel, and the state of Israel is not the state. Today, the state of Israel is a fascist state. It's not the state we tried to. My cousin tells me that she was a socialist. Everybody in my childhood was a socialist or a communist. And they said that's not the state that we wanted, with these rabbis and all of that kind of right-wing fascist group. And it's got to
almost done, Renee.
Yes, and it's got, once we get rid of these elements on the extreme right and get rid of Bibi, hopefully, I personally believe in a two-state solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. We're going to now turn it over to Heather Burnham. Heather is the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, Frank Blumenau. Her talk will focus on the effects of trauma and the lasting impression of violence, as well as how fighting for Palestine honors the memories of her grandfather and other activists' relatives. Thank you. Here's Heather.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
You're muted, Heather. You're muted. Good. You're still muted. Sorry. Yes. It goes back and forth, it seems. That's
Okay.
good.
Okay. Sorry about that. What I was trying to say is I'd like to start by thanking the organizers of this event, JVP Detroit, my cousins who helped me, and everyone who has joined us today. I especially want to welcome our Palestinian siblings into this space. Thank you for being here, and know that we stand with you. There's a few pictures that are up right now of my grandfather and my great-grandmother, and my great aunt and her family. Her whole family, they all died in concentration camps in Auschwitz, I believe. In the next slide, if you could, Chloe. Thank you. Are some more pictures. My great-grandfather, Fritz Blumenau, was an artist. So in the corner there is one of his paintings, as well as my, there's a picture of my great cousin and her daughter. And then my grandfather and grandmother, as I remember them, is the colored picture there. As mentioned in my introduction, I am the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather's name was Frank Blumenau, and he was just a small child when Hitler rose to power. He lived in constant fear as his relatives were rounded up and taken to concentration camps. Despite the odds, my great-grandfather Fritz was able to escape Germany with his wife and son and immigrate to the United States of America. Although my grandfather, his parents, and his uncle Walter were able to escape to the States, his other uncle Kurt and aunts Gertrude and Adele and their entire families were not so lucky and lost their lives in the concentration camps. So many branches of my family tree were trimmed away by the Nazis. Their voices and dreams were lost forever. As a child, I always wanted to know the history of my own family. And as any child would, I asked a lot of questions. I got to learn that my great-grandfather was a painter who has 2 impressionist paintings in the DIA, although I don't think they're currently available to view. I learned that my great-grandmother made beautiful lace art. I learned that my grandfather still loved German food and liked and enjoyed speaking German when he had someone to talk to, and he could play the organ and piano. However, it didn't take me long to learn to not ask so many questions, not to get so close. I learned that if I dug too deep, that it would hurt my grandfather, that he would quietly withdraw and sometimes not eat. I remember sharply the sensation of coming close to knowing the truth about my family, like a scent that you catch on a windy day, gone in an instant, but lingering in the mind. I never got answers to many of my questions as a child, and if it weren't for my cousin sharing what they'd learned by researching, I may never have gotten any answers at all. When I learned about my ties to Judaism, I was in my late teens. I tried secretly learning about the Jewish religion and would light tea lights in my room for Hanukkah, fearing that if I were found out, it would just stir up more pain for my grandfather and in turn my mother, my aunts and uncle, and my siblings and my cousins. Sometimes I would feel frustration and regret that I was denied the chance to have my history integrated into my childhood. I felt cut off from a rich culture and all of its traditions. I would selfishly think that my grandfather should have been able to move past such atrocities and be proud of his heritage. These fleeting, terrible thoughts plagued me often. However, as I grew and into my adult years, I've been able to see the trauma that lingers for so long. I can now relate through my own experiences of being a survivor of childhood sexual assault. I now know what it feels like to feel shame in surviving, to feel small and weak and defenseless. I can relate to that engulfing numb loneliness. I can now reflect on the impact of living while the cousins his own age were murdered in Auschwitz. I think about how important it was that he remained silent or risk implicating his parents and not being able to trust the people around him. Trauma like that leaves its mark. I love my granddaddy with all of my heart. And though I will never know exactly what he felt and thought, I know that he was strong and brave, a survivor who struggled to make it in a country that he couldn't fully be himself in. Although I have had to spend many years learning to love myself, I have always loved the people of this world. And although my family couldn't connect me to my history, they instilled an extremely strong sense of empathy in my heart. As I've been engaging in protests and making activism a core component of my life, I found that I'm related to a woman named Alice Hers, who had married my grandfather's cousin, Paul. Alice and her daughter, Helga, also immigrated to the United States after being held in an internment camp in France. In fact, it was Helga who helped my great-grandparents and grandfather escape through France. Both Alice and Helga were prolific anti-fascists, feminists, and peace activists. During Hitler's reign, Alice had even written several papers criticizing the Nazi Party. During the war on Vietnam, Alice, inspired by Buddhist monks, made the ultimate sacrifice and set herself on fire at the corner of Oakman and Grand River in Detroit. She was the first person in the United States to protest in this way. Knowing that I've been carrying Alice and Helga's ideals in the present has given me an immense sense of comfort and solidarity with those on the side of justice who have lived throughout history. I know of my family, my Jewish family, who suffered and lost so much during the genocide inflicted on them by the Nazis. If they were still alive today, they would be fighting for the rights and freedom of the Palestinian people. I believe with every fiber of my being that Alice is with me at each and every protest, during every phone call, and with every action I have taken to end the occupation that has been going on for over 75 years in our name. I cannot turn on my TV or computer without seeing the Nazi Party mirrored perfectly in the Israeli government. Only now updated with TikToks of soldiers laughing as they blow up buildings and run over Palestinian bodies. I have watched as these modern day Nazis humiliate, torture, and murder innocent men, women, and children. I have seen them round up the rightful inhabitants of Palestine and force them into camps. I am now seeing starving bodies and hearing stories of Israeli surgeons harvesting skin and organs from Palestinian civilians that they have murdered. I've witnessed Palestinians covered in white phosphorus, their skin burning away. I've seen the bodies of children, the age of my own preschool students, blown to pieces or crushed. I've witnessed amputations done with no anesthesia. I've watched as the IDF decimates every remnant of Palestine, their art, history, culture, 100-year-old olive trees, and even the animals. This carbon copy crime I had already seen in black and white staring at me from history books, but now I can see those haunting images come to life in real time, documented by those who are suffering and praying for an end to this violence. This is the same story we heard happened in Europe, and we are now inflicting it on the Middle East through a colonial entity masquerading as a Jewish country. The Jewish faith that I've so recently been learning about condemns murder, theft, torture, and violence. But the IDF only functions on these crimes committed against Palestinians of multiple faiths. This is not a religious war. I am not a scholar, but I can see the greed and strategic evil at work. This is a genocide. As the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, it is my duty to fight against Zionism and the white supremacy that gave birth to it. And I can fight it with every breath in my body, just as it is the duty of every person who claims to stand for morality and goodness. There is no complicated. There are no two sides to this story. There are no excuses to sit on the sidelines as Palestinians bury their children and children their parents. If you have ever wondered what you would have done in the face of the Nazis, know that you are doing it now. We are witnessing a change in the hearts of humanity. So many people have taken difficult steps to do what is right. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't normally speak up, that I am meek and quiet. Trauma and guilt made me afraid. Palestine has taught me to be brave. Palestine has taught the world that we can stand together regardless of language, race, religion, and origin. We can all open our hearts and strengthen our spirits. We can help each other and not expect anything in return. We can lift up our voices and give platform to the oppressed. We can fill ourselves with such a formidable love that we can fight for Palestine, for Congo, Sudan, Tigray, Myanmar. We can fight for those in our own backyards and know that we have the resilience to make a difference. Before I go, I want to end with a line that Alice left her daughter Helga in a letter. She says, "I did not do this out of despair, but out of hope for mankind." That line sticks with me. I pray that all our actions can be done in the same spirit. I believe in our power as a human race. I believe in freedom, I believe in justice and peace, and I believe that we have the means to obtain them. We can't bring back my family who died in the Holocaust, just as we cannot bring back the dead of yesterday. But we have a choice. We can help the people of today so that their tomorrow can bring healing and happiness. And
Thank you. Thank you so
end it
much.
there.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was so powerful and so beautiful. And the spirit of my great aunt who survived Auschwitz is in my heart right now. And seeing the tattoo on her hand, on her arm, and her story that she was not able to have children because of the torture that she encountered in the concentration camp is coming back to me. So we need to know that never again really means never again. We've got to put our hearts and souls into everything we can do to prevent this genocide from continuing. So now I'd like to introduce my friend and Nakba survivor, Hassan Nuash. He is a Palestinian 1948 Nakba survivor who was born in, and please forgive me, Hassan, if I pronounce this incorrectly, Ein Karem, what is now called West Jerusalem. Hassan is a published poet, anthropologist, and longtime activist for Palestinian rights. He's been an inspiration to me as I've learned about the oppression of the Palestinians. Please welcome Hassan.
Thank you. I was so moved by Heather's presentation that I just want you to get my hugs, and you're such a wonderful human being. That's what I have a relationship with people who are Jewish like that, like Sharon Feldman, Barbara Fairfield, and many others. I was born in Ein Karem, which is a sleepy, pristine artist preserve with a 24-hour running spring waterfall, irrigating terraces of the town's vegetable and in onions, radishes, lettuce, celery, spinach, beets, turnips, tomatoes, beans. The townspeople were mostly artisans in stone preparations for stone houses to be built. My father and grandfather were master builders who actually had built our own story house, the two-story house with writing still carved on the arched stone entrance in the second floor in Arabic saying, "Whoever comes in here is safe." Ein Karem, of course, a Jewish family lives in there now. Ein Karem is said to always be in pink and green. Olive groves, as far as you can see from its terraces. In the summer, we would live in our vineyard in a summer cottage, in stone, modest summer cottage. I was 6, 7 years old when the Deir Yassin massacre came in, but we were at the time fruit growers. We grew apricots, almonds, plus later grapes, apples, plums, cherries, for instance, prunes. The Ein Karem was a hub for the neighboring villages. It has actually about 3 olive oil mills, 5 flour mills, post office, a pharmacy, 2 doctors, and Dr. Schauer, one of them, was Jewish. 5 open air, expansive cafes, busy with hookahs galore, and card players, domino players, and the tawla players in Arabic, called, catering to visitors until late in the evening. Not admitted to first grade after They tried to get me in because I was too young. The area scene came in as the massacre I referred to a second ago, only a mile away near where Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, is built on Ain Karim's property. Ethnic cleansing of 48% of Palestinians came in before May 15th, 1948, because disturbances started in attacks by the Zionists back in 1947 in November. 700,000 people became refugees. 550 villages became destroyed and leveled to the ground in order to prevent Palestinian refugees to come back according to UN resolutions. Of course, we lost our orchards, our olive trees, and our communal relationship to our townspeople, where became refugees into the east part of the Jordan River. But then we could not go to schools there. So my brother was injured in the war. As he recovered, he had some inside people who can admit us back to government schools back in East Jerusalem. We shipped back to East Jerusalem, but separating from my parents because my father was a home builder and he had no jobs in East Jerusalem because it still was tenable in the war situation. So he had to stay in Amman with my mom. So I essentially became an orphan. So, but then I was really good in school, and I was asked by my elder brother, who took us in back in East Jerusalem, to have me always be first in my class. And I graduated accordingly from high school among the top 1% among 2,000 graduates. I got full rides, 2 full rides to university, but I turned them down because one of them was requiring for us not to be refugees anymore and give up all our rights in Ain Karim. Of course, the family decided not to do that. So I came to the US, got my bachelor's until the 67 war as a graduate student. Then I was to go to medical school, but then I switched careers because I couldn't stay away from the library. I went into anthropology and I became an activist ever since. I've almost like burning the candle from not only two ends, but all across. I got married and all that, and then the FBI became actually chasing us because we are pro-Palestinians students, and they came to talk to my kids. My wife ended up chasing them away on the sidewalk, and my elder brother died, and of course later on both my mom and father died, and I could not go back to them to see them all pass our goodbye because I was an activist. They were arresting people who come into Israel under the occupation. So I've been essentially deprived of my normalcy in dictating to me to live as an activist all my life instead of living the art in my soul and poetry. I did publish some poetry, and I have a whole bunch of poems ready to go, but who has time for poetry? In the final analysis, I decided to risk the return back home, and no matter what the torture is going to face me with under Israeli
2 minutes, Hassan.
fine, Israeli occupation. And at the time when I was contemplating I was somehow forced to make the decision saying, well, I can no longer live separate from my home country. And I really was forced to overcome that fear and say, okay, I'm going to just take the risk. I cannot take it anymore. As if I was really returning back to my mother, from whom I was separated as a child, to myself. I'm still a child inside, no matter how old. That's my story.
Thank you so much, Hassan. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker. Ismail Noor is a Palestinian born. He's Palestinian born in the West Bank. Let me make sure I am I unmuted? Can people hear me? I think so. Okay. He was born in the West Bank village. After
You
he
breaking in and
considers
out.
himself a Nakba survivor. He was forced to leave Palestine in 1967 and eventually relocated to Michigan, where he became a student organizer, started a family, completed his PhD in sociology, and continued to share the story of Palestinian resistance to the Zionist occupation. Please welcome Ismail.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was born in 1949, just a few months after the Nakba, but I still consider myself as a Nakba survivor, or at least a son of a Nakba survival. I was very close to my father, who taught me a lot about the horrible experiences that they had under the British colonial occupation in Palestine. Certainly, for me and many others of the Palestinians and the Arabs have no problem at all with the Jews as such. Our problem is with the Zionist racist ideology that is actually born in Europe, and it is a product of Europe, as well as the Holocaust itself is a product of Europe, and it happened in Europe. We do not have any connection or contribution to that horrible situation that faced those who were sent to concentration camps and so forth. But again, we paid the price, even the price of the Holocaust itself, as a people, as a country, as a nation, as a land. And Europe, presented by Britain and France, which are both of them are colonial powers at the time, decided to wage a continuous war against Palestinians and against Palestine. And the war was not only against the people, but also against the land and against the culture. And it continues, this war continues for almost 110 years now, under the British mandate, and then under the so-called the Zionist entity that the British planted in our homeland. And it continues up to this moment. Again, I did not experience myself what happened in the Nakba, but I grew up in Palestine, in that small town where my family used to farm their lands, or what was left of it, because much of the land that they own were confiscated by the Zionist entity inside what became to be the so-called state of Israel. And
Let
my
me know when
family,
you want me to advance the slides here, Hus.
yeah, just move it a little bit. This is a traditional key for those who left or expelled from Palestine. They left with nothing except the key, on the hope that they will return to Palestine sometime. And it has been 75 years or more, which is my age. I am 75 years, and actually in 10 days or 15 days, I will be 76. And this is my own town called Anabta. And this is this woman is standing in front of the mosque in Anabta. And this is the central area of that small town. So, and this is another picture from Anabta, where the river divide the town into two halves, north and south. This is a typical market, if you call it market, attached to the house where the owner of the market lives. So the owner opens it whenever he wants to, close it whenever he wants to, and it is convenient for the owner. This is very well known small shop in town. This is what Anabta looks like nowadays, with lots of greens, lots of buildings, and extended to the east, to the west, and it is located 17 kilometers west of Nablus and 10 kilometers east of Tulkarem, on the major highway that connects the two major cities. And it is about 22 miles from the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So my father and his siblings and his father and so forth used to go on donkeys and horses to their land back there to farm and cultivate and come back. And this is another street in that little town. You can see that it is hilly, and they say that it is about 700 years old, the city, or more. This is, in fact, here, this is my home where I was born, this one. And this is the area where I used to play and with my siblings and my relatives and so forth. And of course, this is an olive oil extractor processor where they crush the olives. And then this is very interesting picture, which has, you can count them. Those are from two families that are married from each other. It's called Abu Asal, the father of honey in English, and the Noor family, which is my family. And those, each one of those has the name written on it. This is, could you go back? This is my father here, and this is my grandfather here, and this one is uncle of my father, and he was kidnapped by the Turkish army while he was 10 years old from the city from from Anabta and taken all the way to Istanbul. And he never came back, except in 1920s, one time, and in 1952, one time. And I remember
2
that I
minutes.
saw 2 minutes. Of course, yes, this is a picture that is me, myself, and this is my brother, this is my father, and all those are my relatives. And this is a start journey for me to go to a school abroad, to Europe. Actually, I went to Yugoslavia, and then this is a amount of pictures from Anabta and from other places that speaks to the experience of the Nakba, and before the Nakba and after the Nakba. This is my sister-in-law and her daughters doing a stuffed grape leaves. Those are my two brothers. This is the oldest, and this is the youngest. I am the youngest of the three, but these are my brothers. And this is actually my wedding celebration. And those are my siblings, and yeah, my siblings and my relatives are doing a dabka and in the wedding. Move a little bit. Yeah, this is my nephew, and he is a prisoner of war, and he was sentenced 4 life sentences. For what? We do not know. And he is still in the prison. So much for, and here I am with my wife in Dearborn. Actually, this picture is a wedding, and this woman is dancing while holding this vase on her head, and that is traditional for her generation. And this is actually the traditional dress of my town, but this is a little girl that is dressing that. This is the key. As you know, everybody has a key. I don't have a key myself, but this is replacing the actual key of my house. And this is just an art. Yeah, an art. That's all. So much for the pictures. Of course, my experience and specifically started in 1956. That is where I encountered the Palestinian struggle. At that time, I was in the first grade, and moved to 1967, where I was a teenager at the time. The Israeli army came to Anabta as an occupier, and called on the residents to come down from the mountains and where they were hiding, and they said you're free to move around and so forth. 4 hours after that, they called again using the mosque loudspeaker. Everybody has to be on the main highway which crosses the town in the middle. And anybody left in their houses, we will shoot him to death. So everybody went to the accordingly to the doing what they have been said or told to do. And just a few hours after that, the buses came, the Israeli buses company, which is called Egid. Egid is still Egid there, and ordered everybody on the buses. And the bus that I was ordered to get in with my family, my relatives, and so forth, 65, 66 individuals on the bus. I was able to speak English at the time, learning from the school. And two soldiers came on the bus and ordered the driver to drive all the way to River Jordan. All the way to River Jordan. They did not even let anybody out of the bus, even to go to the bathroom or even to do anything. And they dropped us near the river, on the edge of the river. And the soldier told me in English with American accent, completely American accent. See, that is King Hussein at the time. Take your group and go. We had elderly, 2 or 3 people died on the edge of the river. And I say
Wrapping up,
that,
Ms. Neal.
yes, I will. And I say that they have American accent because nowadays there are 800,000 settlers on the West Bank, most of which are from New York, and none of them are children or survivors of the Holocaust at all. They came there because of economic benefits that they gain from this, and that is what Joe Biden said in one of the videos, that this is an investment for him. $3 billion, the best investment, he said. And probably it is an investment for the rest of the colonial power like Britain and France, Italy and Germany, which committed a lot of genocides in this century, in the past century. That is why they rushed to help Netanyahu and the Zionist entity when October 7 happened, because they were worried about their investment, not to rescue the individuals from being killed or what have you. I have a lot.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we still have 2 more speakers.
Yes.
We're going to have to, let me give you 30 seconds to wrap it up, okay? And then we're going to have another one of these teach-ins so that you can share more.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. I wrap up here that I ended up in the United States. I came in 1977 directly from Amman, Jordan, to Lansing, Michigan, going to Michigan State University. And I completed my PhD at Michigan State University and stayed there. I became a state employee until I retired from the state employee, from the state, and I am now retired. During that time, I was the president of the General Union of Palestinian Students in the United States in the mid-1980s, trying to organize and educate and bring people to be educated of the issues, especially such issues as genocides and things that is happening to us since the creation of the Zionist entity.
Thank you, Ismail.
Thank you.
We will have you back because your story is so moving and important for us to understand. I had no idea some of the things you told us about. I had no idea that had happened. So
Yes.
we are now I'd like to introduce Damon Hartley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing. It's really so heartbreaking to hear, but we need to know this. We need to know this.
Yes.
Damon Hartley is a retired staff photographer from the Detroit Free Press. He's been nominated 5 times and runner-up twice for the Pulitzer Prize, named in 1990 as a Michigan Press Photographer of the Year as well. He spent a month in the West Bank and Gaza and Palestine during the first Intifada in 1987, and he was nominated for, oh, I said he was nominated. He will show his photographs from that period, and he will talk about the worldwide significance of the ongoing genocide in Palestine. Welcome. Damon, can you unmute?
I'm unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I'm not going to go and say, give a story with every photo. I would like to, first of all, recognize the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and also thank the Coalition and Jewish Voice for Peace for inviting me to be here. Let me start off by saying that the world changed with the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers, and all who were present in the US at the time understood this immediately. Gaza is another such moment. The implications are vast. Gaza is a ghastly window into the crisis of global capitalism, an economic, social, and political system that is imploding. As I was sent by to Palestine by the Detroit Free Press to cover the Intifada and uprising in 1987 and 88. I was there for a month and told I would be there for a year. Most of these photos appeared in the Detroit Free Press. There was opposition from the Zionist community in Southfield, Michigan. They said my coverage was biased towards Palestinians, and I was pulled. I told my editors I tried to find photos of Israeli soldiers who were not holding clubs when talking with Palestinian people. A couple of photos show the body of a 12-year-old killed by soldiers with rubber bullets. That's when they said that the rubber bullets were non-lethal, which was not true. Most Americans believe U.S. propaganda with not knowing how this situation came to be. They were killing innocent men, women, and children then as well. During the whole 6-year Intifada, the Israeli army killed at least 1,000 Palestinians, of which 240 were children. Killing innocent men, women, children, and babies is nothing new for the Zionists. What I viewed daily was the humiliation of the Palestinian people. And I think some of our speakers indicated the kind of humiliation that they were subjected to. Zionist forces claimed a biblical right to Palestine and violently displaced the residents to form the state of Israel over 75 years ago. This would be like Mexico coming into the US and displacing our citizenry, or like the US entering North America and displacing the Native Americans and putting them on reservations. Wait, we did do that. Israel is the recipient of $3 to $4 billion of our tax money each year. It is basically a huge military base in the Middle East for the US to control the oil and Arab states. Up till now, at least 100 journalists have been killed in Israel's war, which began on October 7th. Retired Major General Yitzhak Brick admits, quote unquote, all of our missiles, the ammunition, the precision guided bombs, all the airplanes and bombs, it's all from the US. The minute they turn off the tap, you can't keep fighting. Everyone understands that we can't fight this war without the United States, period. The United States could stop the ongoing Gaza massacre of Palestinians by the Zionist government calling itself Israel in 24 hours, but it refused to do so, even though the majority of Americans demand this. Israel dropped 65,000 tons of bombs on Gaza in the first 89 days. These weapons of mass destruction are being paid for with our tax dollars. War is very profitable, and billionaires are getting rich off the misery and suffering of the Palestinian people. Slaughtering human beings is more profitable than slaughtering cattle. Israel has fired thousands of missiles into the most densely populated area, killing many civilians. At least 26,000 Palestinians have been killed and 64,487 wounded by Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip since the start of the war. more than 8,600 Palestinian children have been killed by Israeli forces in Gaza since October 7th, according to the government media office, which added that thousands more are missing under the rubble and relentless bombardment. In response, Israel has fired thousands of missiles. I'm not a public speaker, and that's why I became a photographer. So I had to write down what I wanted to say. And now I'm trying to go through that without getting confused and confusing myself. What I would like to say, though, I think that in my 50 years as an activist, I've never seen an event that had the repercussions and consciousness raising around the world. It's unprecedented. And I think that more and more people, and especially the youth, are understanding that the U.S. is a monster, that the U.S. is viewed by the rest of the world as the most dangerous, horrific government and state ever. And, you know, you only have to look at our own history. U.S. was the first country and only country that ever dropped nuclear weapons on a civilian population in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I say all that to say that we have to understand that the U.S. will do the same thing to us and our people as we move forward, as this system collapses, and it's collapsing. And you see fascism rising to try to preserve and save this system. So, and the U.S. does have a history of bombing neighborhoods. There was the MOVE occupation in Philadelphia a couple of decades ago, where they went in and they just dropped bombs on the whole community, neighborhood, and killed 40 or 50 people. I don't really have much more to say other than it's just, you can't go to Palestine and not fall in love with the Palestinian people and their struggle for freedom and justice. So I think that what we need to do is continue to do what we are doing, educating ourselves, educating the people around us, go to protests, rallies, whatever, in order to attempt to stop this carnage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Damon, for sharing your photos, your stories, and your wisdom. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll have more information about how you can take action at the end of the presentation. I'd like to welcome another person to talk with us. Originally, we hoped that Huwaida Araf would join us, but she is not feeling well tonight. But we have her husband, Adam Shapiro, who is a longtime activist for Palestine, and in many cases has been working hand in hand and side by side with Huwaida. He was involved in ISM, which is the International Solidarity Movement, which was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think at the same time, it was on the US terrorist list. At the same time, it was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. He's been part of the Free Gaza movement and has made a 6-part documentary film series called Chronicles of a Refugee, about Palestinian refugees' lives and experiences from 1948 to 2008. He is filling in for Huwaida at the last moment. We are so grateful. Adam, please join us.
Thank you, Barbara. I really appreciate it. Indeed, Huwaida is not feeling well tonight, and it's not because you asked her to speak to connect the Holocaust to today, which is a challenge that I'm going to hopefully try to meet. I do want to acknowledge and recognize and thank the previous speakers who shared their own personal experiences, Heather, Renee, Hassan, Ismail, and Damon. It has really profoundly impacted me tonight listening to your stories, and even though I know some of you, these were things that either I didn't know or came through in a different way, and you know, I think it's really important that we center and hear these voices, especially now. My own story of how I came to be a Palestine activist, in some ways, it starts with the Holocaust. Not because I had family, but because when I was a student in elementary school in New York City, we did have Holocaust education classes, and we did have Holocaust survivors come to our elementary school. to speak to us. And it was in that course of time that I learned the story of Raoul Wallenberg, who was a Swedish diplomat who saved the lives of many Jews who were potentially victims of the Nazi forces by issuing passports to get people to safety. Raoul Wallenberg himself subsequently was detained when the Soviets reached the territories that they did and took him back to prison in the Soviet Union and subsequently died in prison. But his life was always an inspiration to me in learning through this idea that as an outsider, to intervene, to try to do what you could to help in whatever way you could, was something that I feel like has instructed some of what I've done in my life. But also learning about the Holocaust and learning about what happened in detail, and then seeing what was happening on the ground in Palestine when I first arrived there for the first time in 1996, and seeing the forms of control, seeing the forms of the way Palestinians were forced to live, the kind of lives that they had under occupation, really resonated with what I had learned from history, and compelled me to start getting involved in terms of activism and work on the Israeli-Palestinian issues. I subsequently, as you mentioned, became involved with the ISM, but after that, what ties into this for me is, and what I think ties to the experience of the Holocaust with what we're seeing today, and how we understand what's happening today, and how we have to understand today as part of a continuum of this history. I note that, well, let me say first, when I was making my film series, Chronicles of a Refugee, I traveled around and met Palestinian refugees, many of whom had survived the Nakba, and learned the stories of their lives over 60 years. And one thing that struck me, and this was in 2007, 2008, was that the Nakba never ended. We hear Hassan Ismail talk about it because it's become familiar in many ways to talk about the Nakba as a event that happened in 1947, 1948. But I would argue that we actually need to change the language, and instead of referring to today as a second Nakba or a third Nakba, we actually need to talk about it as Nakba, period. That this is a continuation, unlike the Holocaust, which did come to an end, and unlike some other genocides which did stop at some point, the Nakba has not stopped. And from learning from interviewing Palestinian refugees around the world, I learned that at least 13 times between 1967 and 2008, Palestinian communities, whether they would be in refugee camps, such as Tel Azatar in Lebanon, or Nahr Bered, or Iraq, or Yarmouk in Syria since 2008, or in Gaza today, have been completely uprooted and destroyed. And this is a consequence of the original crimes that occurred in 1947, 1948, and directly tied to them. And so we have to understand today that what Palestinians are experiencing, and it's not just in Gaza, just in the last year, the United Nations documented over 2,000 Palestinians in the West Bank were uprooted from their villages. And the term that we use today is forcibly expelled by armed settlers, and they're backed by the Israeli army in the West Bank. But this is an ongoing process and something that we have seen unfolding over a long period of time. It's not, we have to change our conception, I think, of how genocides occur. And I think our South African comrades made an effort towards educating the court and the world about this in their presentation when they referred to the Nakba of 1947-48. But it's an ongoing 75-year process so far. And I think the challenge to us today is to say not only never again, but to say enough. That 75 years of ongoing Nakba, of ongoing genocide, whether it be people being forced to live in exile in refugee camps, being forced to live under occupation and apartheid and all the forms of control that Israel has, or the experience of today, what is going on the ground right in front of everyone's eyes. I mean, in Jerusalem, where you have diplomats, in Jerusalem, where you have the world's media, forget that they're not going to Gaza. in Jerusalem today, the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem, which has been home to Palestinians, but also an Armenian community that survived and fled their own genocide at the beginning of the 20th century. This community now is being forcibly expelled or effectively uprooted from their core community in Jerusalem. And it's seen. It's not Gaza where the media can't get to. It's right there in Jerusalem. So this is an experience that Palestinians have had ongoing this entire time. And unfortunately, what has happened, both because of what happened in the 1940s, but also how, as Renee mentioned, the implication and abuse of the Holocaust through the IHRA definition and the turning of this, the utilization of this into a weapon, the Holocaust has become implicated in the crime of genocide that Israel is now on trial for in The Hague. And there could be no more devastation, I think, to the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust than to have turned their suffering into a weapon by which to abuse another people. And I think we heard that from our speakers tonight. And I think we have to continue to uplift their voices and the voices of others around the world who do speak this truth to power. And I'd like to suggest, just as a closing, because I'll keep my comment short, something Hassan said earlier when he was referring to the others on the call, that he referred to them as Jews like that. And I think what he meant was Jews who stand up for justice. And if we can take this moment to uplift the voices and empower each other, those of us who are Jewish, but all of us who stand for justice for Palestinians, to be Jews like that, and not the Jews like the Smotriches, the Ben-Gvirs, the Netanyahus, and their precursors, the Levingers and the Kahanes and the Cooks. That's where the battle is now. In some ways, and I'm not someone who ascribes to Judaism or follows the Jewish culture or identifies as such, but in some ways, what's at stake now is not the survival of Israel. It's actually the survival of the Jewish people as a people that aren't genocidal. Because unfortunately, Netanyahu and the state of Israel and their accomplices in the White House and in Downing Street and in other places have corrupted not just the memory of the Holocaust, but in these days, the identity of the Jewish people. So I think that's the stakes we're fighting for now as well, in addition to the survival and viability of the Palestinian people, which we have to always remember at the forefront is the community that is, on the front lines of risk today in ways that are really unimaginable. I mean, it's something I myself have been to Darfur during the genocide. I have helped and documented the experiences of Palestinians from Iraq who were tortured in ways that I refuse to name again because of how horrific it was. And yet the suffering that we're seeing today that Heather alluded to, she spoke to about what we see on our screens and social media and not on American TV, but on other TVs. This is something I think all of us have never seen before in many ways, and evokes not just memories of the Holocaust, but fears for even worse. And so I'll leave it at that, but I thank you all for organizing this tonight, for bearing with me as a speaker, and I know Hueda would have done a much better job than I, so next time you'll have her, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. I think you did an incredible presentation that was so moving and educational, and maybe we need to have another another teach-in and show your movie and have you back with Hueda. So I'd like to jump to some actions that we can, I'd like to do the actions first, and then we can come back to questions and answers, because I want to respect people's time. If they're able to stay longer and ask questions, and if our speakers can stay a little longer, I appreciate it. But as Adam said, all people need, want, and deserve safety. And this war on Gaza and Palestinians is destroying and endangering safety for everyone, both in Palestine, Israel, in the US, and around the world. So JVP calls upon you to please continue to take action to end this violence. and demand justice, freedom, safety, and equality for Palestinians, and demand an end to the U.S. funding of the Israeli military. So here are some ways that you can do that. We've got some QR codes up. One is to continue to attend protests and rallies to demand a permanent ceasefire, peace, justice, and a humanitarian solution. So let's use our brains, not bombs. Our grassroots efforts, joining millions of others protesting around the world, is helping to make a difference. Call, email, visit, and contact your elected officials every day if you can, please. And you can learn about how to do this by using that QR code, scanning that QR code, and going to Jewish Voice for Peace, jvp.org. There are links so that you can easily contact your elected official, and up from your state reps, your senators, and Biden and Blinken, and you can send them emails or call them. So please, we need everybody to do that. Speak up at your city council, county, and school board meetings, and at your neighborhood union and workplace meetings to urge your municipalities and your organizations to support ceasefire resolutions. Join Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit, and there's the QR code to join JVP, to join Jewish Voice for Peace. Your membership will help support what we're doing if you use that link with the QR code. A good deal of this will go back to Detroit. Most of it will go back to the Detroit area for the work that we're doing. And we'll put the link in the chat as well. Please donate and support organizations that support medical and humanitarian aid to Gaza and to Palestine. So if I'll put that link in there, and if everybody can grab that QR code. So here's the link to donate locally to JVP, and visit jvp.org to learn about, to be active. Okay, do we want to move to questions and answers for those of us who are able to stay?
Yes.
So Chloe is going to lead us in the questions and answers.
So if people want to put their questions in the chat, I'll be reading them out loud, and then our panelists can have the opportunity to respond. So while we're waiting for some questions, okay, so far, some questions about Frank Blumenau's painting, but I'll open the questions then. So for our panelists, could you speak, and I know many of you have, but speak more on what is anti-Semitism and is criticizing Israel and standing up for Palestinians anti-Semitic? Do any of our panelists want to tackle that?
Heather,
I
Renee
see.
your hand.
Renee should.
Okay, wait, let me find Renee.
Well, Heather's already there, so let her speak,
okay,
and then
sorry.
we'll move to Renee.
Okay. The question being, is criticizing the Zionist anti-Semitic? I would have to say no. I feel like in the same way, people, like, you can't say criticizing the Westboro Baptist Church is criticizing all of Christianity. That's just crazy. Like, you have to look at what is happening. You have to look at morality. You have to look at humanity, and you have to look at the actual tenets of the Jewish faith and what it stands for. And I feel like the Zionists have completely gone so far from, you know, at least everything that I've learned about the Jewish faith. And I can't say that saying that being anti-Zionist is being anti-Semitic in any way. I could never make that connection.
Thank you, Heather. All right, Renee, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah. Yes, please. I'll make it blunt. There really isn't anti-Semitism in the world today. What there is anti-Israel, or what they call anti-Zionist, against the actions of the Israeli state. And you have to say it's anti-Zionist or anti-Israel. The other anti-Semitism comes from the right wing, and you have to clarify that as well. People, for example, like Steve Bannon or any of those Trumpians. Steve Bannon, I'll give you an example. He loves Israel and the Jews there because, of course, they're in the middle of this war against all these Muslims that he also hates. But in terms of his views of American Jews, he doesn't like them at all. He's an anti-Semite as regards American Jews because they tend to be more liberal and they tend to vote Democrats. So I would call him and all those right-wing Christian nationalists anti-Semites. But in terms of his views of American Jews,
I think we lost your audio, Renee, for a moment there. But
well, no, somebody was saying something, so I was trying to listen. No, he does. I was saying he does not like American Jews because they're too liberal and they vote Democrats. But those right-wing Christian nationalists, they love Jews from Israel.
Can I say something?
Yes. Who is that? So I can.
This is Ismail.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have a video off. Sorry. Jesus.
Okay. As a student of sociology, race specifically is not scientifically 100% determined. So there is no pure race as such. And we know that Abraham had Noah had four sons. One of them Sam, and the other Ham, and Joseph, and Aram. They all are brothers. I mean, from the same father and mother. You can people are mixed. You can say that much of the Arabs themselves are related to Sam, although some of them related to Ham, but yet they are cousins. I mean the same thing. To me, also as a sociologist, the anti-Semitic is a weapon created also in Europe to be used against anybody who would criticize Zionism and its racist ideology. So again, from my own experience on campuses, and I was a president of a student organization, not in one city, but in the whole United States, I did not see any act or maybe that you can say that this is anti-Semitic. But people mix between anti-Semitic or Semite and between Jews and between Israel and between Zionism, and we focus on Zionism. Zionism is not an ideology that can worked with. It is a racist ideology, and it is created in Europe. So that is my take on the issue. So
thank
I
you,
don't.
Ismail. Following up on that, Fadwa Kamari asked in the chat, what is the best way to communicate with someone who is pro-Israel and thinks that Palestinians need to leave for Israelis to feel safe? So do any of our panelists want to answer that question.
Could you repeat the question?
I'm rereading the question. What is the best way to communicate with someone who is pro-Israel?
Okay. I mean, the discussion that is based on religion is no way to go. I mean, how can you bring the two religions or the three religions or the four religions together to agree on something that is common to them? Religion is considered this is haram, this is not haram. I mean, this is prohibited, this is not prohibited, and that's that fixed things for religion. It is difficult to have somebody that believes in Zionism as an ideology to argue with.
Thank you, Ismail. We're gonna let Renee respond quickly, and then we have time for just one more question. If you want to leave those in the chat still.
Yeah, as I understood the question, or the first reading of the question had to do with security. That's always a big one that I get from my Jewish friends. Well, you know, we have to feel safe. Well, you know, Israel has, what is it, 400 nuclear weapons. It's the strongest military. It's the third strongest military in the world. This idea of victimhoods, Jews just love to be victims, especially after the Holocaust. And so their issue is security. Security is not a big deal. All of these issues can be resolved. So if you think about, for example, Korea, North and South Korea, there's been a demarcation zone between the two people there. There's still hostile, but there's a way to solve these problems. So the security issue is just a fig leaf from dealing with the other issues. What you need, really, you can't count on the leadership of either side, the Israelis or the Palestinians. They're both corrupt. They're seen as corrupt from their own people. You need an outside force like the United States to come in and bang some heads together and force them to come to some kind of negotiations. And the United States would have to pay them off the way the US pays everybody off, the way most countries, that's the way you deal. You have some kind of aid program or Marshall Plan or whatever you want to call it. But all these issues are resolvable.
Thank you, Renee. Earlier in the chat, someone asked a rather practical question about donations to the UNWRA. If anyone wants to. Okay. Oh, I see Heather wants to say something, and then I can give it back to you, Barbara.
There we go. Sorry, I just didn't want to like talk too much and take from anyone else. As far as donations are, I'm not like the person who has the most information in this sphere, but my understanding is at talking to a lot of my friends who are in Gaza or have family there, that they're whether the donations, when it comes to money, reach that, whether those donations reach them or not in a meaningful way is tricky. I would highly recommend spending money for the eSIM cards or the eSIM so they can have internet access. I know that is extremely important. If you do donate, doing what is the website? The Charity Check website is extremely helpful as well. I know that's not probably the answer that you were looking for. I just, like I said, from some of the people that I've talked to, I know they're not getting all of the aid that they should be, and a lot of it is even being blocked. And I've seen some videos of Israeli citizens blocking aid trucks from getting there. So I think it is important to do your research, especially if you're someone like me who has very limited funds, to make sure that you are putting your money in the best way possible, towards people.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay. Yep.
I'm gonna give it back to Barbara.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone, our speakers and our attendees, and all the people like Chloe Weisberg and Mercy Decker and others who help with behind the scenes to make this all come together, but especially all of our speakers and for being here tonight and sharing their stories and helping bring truth to power, power to truth. And hopefully we are all inspired to continue working for justice, a permanent ceasefire, equality, and a humanitarian path forward. So if you'd like to be on the Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit email list to find out about other events and teach-ins and webinars that we hope to present, that we will present, please email us at jvpdetroit@gmail.com. The link is in the chat, and we also have a YouTube page. This will be on the YouTube page, and join Jewish Voice for Peace. Help us continue doing the work that we're doing. So I wish everybody a good night, and I will see you at the next protest.
Good work. Good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
I can find the link.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna leave.